Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the ASTROLABE, brought to you by King Pilled. And today, I am sick. It finally reached me. I thought there was an outside chance I might be able to get away from it, but it has finally gotten to me. It's not too bad so far. I'm hoping to try to pin it right about here, slog through it for a couple days, and then make my way back to the land of the well. But there's no guarantee that's going to happen. So if you guys don't hear from me suddenly starting tomorrow, then you'll know why. So it's going to be maybe a relatively shorter show today. I've got a handful of different things. There wasn't any real major interesting stories going on in the news. There's this shooting at this Christian school. I don't have anything really to contribute to that. But real quick, I got to take the Dayquil here. I was gonna do it during the intro, but then for whatever reason the stream on X wasn't working. I had to start it over again, and now it seems to be working. Let me know if you're on X and you're watching. Let me know if it's actually working over there. It says that it is now, but the tweet also, it's not like actually showing the video. It's just showing the link to the broadcast. So I don't know if something's wrong with the Twitter connection. If you're watching right now, do me a favor and just leave me a comment on Twitter so that I know whether or not it's working. Do me a favor and hit that like button. Got some, let's see here. Trump filed a lawsuit. Trump is lawfaring. He's lawfaring away. And he filed a lawsuit against the pollster behind that Iowa poll. I'm going to talk about that. Privatizing USPS. Ukraine assassinated a Russian general. And this seems like a fairly significant move that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about. We're going to touch on that. There is Jay Ford commenting from Twitter, so apparently it is working. It's good to know. And then, let's see, what else did I have in here? Something about Doge, got some Elon stuff. A little Derek Chauvin news that dropped just a few minutes ago. And then I'm going to wrap it up with a video that I'll share with you guys. Should get you in the feelings. It got me earlier today. $10 super chat to start the day from good friend of the show, Colin. He says, God bless our troops. God bless America. And gentlemen, start your engines. Indeed, indeed. You guys, your engines started? Because this is got some nice, wholesome content here to start us off. What's up, Taylor Brown? Bryce, Eric Winter, Straight Buster, Navy Kip, Kate. Man, Screwed Up Texas. Everyone is up in here, even Euthanasia. All right. Another shout out here to Douglas Archer. I'm going to keep shouting him out as long as he keeps posting bangers, and he needs more followers. He's only got 238 followers. He needs to have at least as many as I do because he drops bangers regularly. This one, being a dad is the absolute best. This is a tweet from Trad West. The caption says, POV, my husband tells me he wants to have a baby every single day. And if you remember, I got this clip and the next clip are going to be a callback to something yesterday. Note the music track here.
'Cause after all this time, I'm still into you. I should be over all the butterflies, but I'm into you. And baby, even on our worst nights, I'm into you. Let 'em wonder how we got this far, 'cause I don't really need to wonder at all.
You know, we have all the political content and everything that we focus our attention on all the time. And I mean, I'm a propagator of political content here, so I'm not pointing the fingers at anyone. But I think people overlook this kind of thing, and this is just so freaking wholesome. I want an entire timeline full of this, rewiring my brain, constantly keeping me focused on the things that really matter. Because it's easy to get all caught up in the political goings on, business, work, career, hobbies, all those sorts of things. And this is the reason for it all. This is what really matters. Eastwood is feeling better today, but he's not feeling good. He's got this really like delirious, glassy-eyed look. But he started getting ornery again. He's like the opposite. When he's sick, he's like really, really soft and cuddly. And then once he's well again, then he's a feisty, ornery little bugger. But he he was out. I came downstairs earlier to see what he was up to, and didn't see him around anywhere. And Amy said he's in the backyard. And I looked out in the backyard, and he's just sitting down in a little patch of grass. We don't have a lot of grass in the backyard, but he's got a little patch there. And he was just sitting there, and he was holding a carrot. And she said he's feeding the bunnies. We have bunnies that come into our yard. He's definitely not actually feeding them, but he came in and grabbed his little toy saw and went back out there, and he was shredding the carrot. He's shredding the carrot for the bunnies. So he's taking a nap right now because he was getting like really, really delirious. He looked like he was completely stoned out of his mind or something. He just had his like droopy, bleary eyes, but he was kind of hyper, like he was drunk or something. It's kind of funny. Pray for Eastwood. Pray that he feels better, and that my amazing wife, who's dealing with a broken hand, as well as being really sick herself and taking care of him. So prayers up for the Pigdirk family. So here's another one. This is the soundtrack on that last one. And then this one here, there's a callback from our show yesterday. I was talking to Cooper about this, how there's this weird cultural crossover happening now where the chuds are listening to like, I don't know, early 2000s girl pop. So this is POV, the straightest, most homophobic men you know when they hear that 2010's white girl dance music will be at the function. I don't understand it, but I get it. I get it. It's a wonderful thing about the internet today. All the straightest, most homophobic men you know dancing to 2010's white girl dance music. Because they're bangers. Like, what am I going to do? It's a banger. Evacuate the dance floor. It's just, you can't listen to it without, like, you kind of start bobbing a little bit. Your foot taps, you kind of move. You just can't help it. Just start moving. Beautifully ironic. Okay, next one here. So an NBC host is talking about how she tried to get in touch with the Kamala Harris campaign, and it was basically impossible. Just couldn't get through to him at all. Then she tried to contact Trump, and here's what happened.
Donald Trump had that crazy rally at Madison Square Garden.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I rolled the dice. And I called him on the phone.
You called him?
Answered.
Of course he did. Of course. What'd he say?
And I wasn't calling to chit chat. I said, Mr. President, this is Stephanie Rule. You made a lot of comments last night, blah, 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 blah. And it was not an on-the-record conversation. Long story, so I'm not going to get into what he said, but I called for one reason. I said, you just said a whole bunch of public things. I'd like to sit down for an interview with you. We got 5 days before the election. So we didn't get into anything. There's nothing for me to report. I called him and said, I want an interview with you. Obviously, he said no. But my point is, I was able to get to him by dialing his phone. Right. Now, that might be completely ape shit, and you're like, I can't believe people know this guy's phone number. Yeah. But the reverse of that, if I were to want to connect with VP Harris or President Biden, there's 50 people between me and that. I could write a note that maybe could get to somebody, then through Pony Express and a pigeon, something might end up in a mailbox near them. Yeah. And I called DJT to say, yo, can I have an interview? He told me to go fuck myself, but I still was able to connect with him. Yeah.
But he still picked up.
They can't help it. They can't help but like him. You could see it, like the way this flaming dude reacts to it. He says he picked up, and he's like, oh, you could see in that there was like that flash of respect. Like the dude is Donald Trump, incoming president, and she calls him and he answers himself. Meanwhile, all of our people, Kamala is brat, and I have to go through 50 layers of bureaucracy to try to get a message to have some sort of access to them. Just complete and utter collapse of credibility for the Democratic establishment. Whatever the Democratic Party, whatever form it takes, it's going to be something different. It's going to be different, and it's going to be empowering different people. Because even amongst the most ardent members of their base, they've lost all credibility. And this is all, in their minds, this is like, oh, here's what we need to get better. Here's how we need to do better. And they're probably going to get everything wrong. But they're like, we can't keep doing what we're doing. Having a completely non-responsive bureaucracy with a fake president that even if there are people and we would vote for him and we think the other guy is literally Hitler will pick up his phone when I call him. And maybe it'd be nice to be able to just call and talk to literally Hitler every once in a while just to get the temperature of literally Hitler. You can't even get the temperature of the greatest campaign of all time. Catastrophic failure. Deeply in debt. Burned through $1.5 billion in like 100 days. Totally torched all of their patrons. So now there is no opposition. There is no formal opposition to Trump right now. They're talking a really big game because they know their best case for opposing him right now is by demoralizing everyone. Not just his base, but everyone. It's going to be a nonstop flood of doom and gloom. That's not to say that there's nothing bad happening. Yes, there's going to be lots of very bad things happening. But if you focus all of your attention on the bad things, you miss all the opportunities that open up. Someone commented, I believe it was Tyler, commented on the stream yesterday, and he said it just clicked for him that trust the plan isn't a passive phrase, it's an active phrase. Trust the plan is like this is faith. This is what faith is in the Christian context. Trust the plan. It means get active and start building. Yeah, become the plan you want to trust in, as Colin tweeted just a little bit ago. I retweeted it. Become the plan you want to trust in. Now is the opportunity. And there is going to be some major first mover advantages. Hello, literally Hitler here. How can I help you? He should start answering the phone like that. Imagine some New York Times reporter or something calls up and, hello, literally Hitler here. So this is a big story, it seems. Given everything that's going on with the outgoing administration trying to throw as many gold bars over the deck of the Titanic as possible, while also doing absolutely everything they can to incite Russia into nuking someone. Russia's chief of nuclear, chemical, and biologicals defense force has been assassinated by Ukraine. General Igor Kirillov, like the most Russian name of all time. Igor Kirillov has been the one leading the charge on the U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine. You've seen me share his briefings many times. Kirillov and his aide were both assassinated by an explosive charge planted underneath a scooter that was parked by the entryway to a building that Kirillov was exiting. This is a massive escalation in one of the most brazen assassination attempts of a high-ranking Russian official. It's not an assassination attempt. It was an actual assassination. Kirillov is the one who submitted all the evidence to the UN about Hunter Biden's metabiota and accused Soros, Clinton, Obama, and Biden of creating biological weapons in Ukraine. Ukraine and their U.S. handlers are desperate to keep the U.S.-funded labs in Ukraine a secret. They killed Kirillov because this is the secret they fear most. This is from Clandestine, at War Clandestine on Twitter. And Ukraine has claimed responsibility for it. Ukraine says it killed the general who led Russia's nuclear defense force. A Ukrainian official said Kiev was responsible for the assassination in Moscow of General Igor Kirillov, the chief of Russia's radioactive, chemical, and biological defense forces. So if Ukraine is doing it, Ukraine's not doing this sort of thing on their own. Ukraine is very obvious, and the Russians have made it very obvious that they recognize that Ukraine is really just a cutout for Western intelligence services, and CIA, MI6, Mossad, the entire State Department, and their Atlanticist proxies. Russia's made it very evident that they know exactly who they're at war with, and it's not the Ukraine. Ukraine is just the region where the war is happening, and the Ukrainian people are pawns being thrown at the Russian war machine. But Russia is at war with primarily Britain, honestly. Primarily Britain leading the charge, but as is typical with the British, they don't want to lead their own charge. They want to cleverly, behind the scenes, position the people to actually be the fall guys. It's a very, very efficient way of working, very diplomatic. When you're a tiny little nation that has to maintain a global empire and you don't have any of your own native resources, well, you have to get really, really good at diplomacy. Of course, there's an unholy marriage between British intelligence services and our favorite Middle Eastern democracy. I think there's a lot of debate over is it Israel or is it Britain? Like which one of these is running the show? And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Neither one of them is running the show. They're both running the show. It's a marriage of interests. Britain has a very strong interest in maintaining a presence in the Middle East as a staging ground for their other operations and maintaining access to energy that doesn't come from the U.S. or Russia. Because the U.S. and Russia are the greatest threats to the British imperial system. America is former colony, but America is aging out of its colonial stage. And it's actually beginning to take over the empire. Instead of just being the muscle, the proxy that keeps the corpse of it alive. So the UK does not want to be dependent for energy on either one of these major powers, and they've got an age-old feud with the Russians. So they need to keep channels open through the Middle East. And then obviously, at this point, everyone's abundantly familiar with the aspirations of our favorite Middle Eastern democracy. But I think to say it's one or the other that's leading operations here is wrong. It isn't one or the other. The world's much more complicated than that. It's all of them. And there's also the continental European interests as well, who are in a lot of ways aligned with the British and the Israelis. They're in many ways aligned with them, but if they were all collectively to defeat their opponents, they would immediately be at war with one another because those feuds go much, much deeper into the past. But really, all of Europe is just, they are the most screwed in this coming economic crisis that's gonna cover the globe. They are the most screwed because they're the region that is least capable of sustaining themselves. All of their enemies are positioned in a way right now to be able to kind of batten down the hatches and ride out the storm. But they don't have that capacity. They depend entirely upon being able to extract energy, food, other resources from other parts of the world. And they just are never satisfied to just have like a cooperative trade agreement. They have to be the ones getting the leg up on every single thing. They don't realize that they're not special anymore. Once upon a time, the British Empire was a great, wonderful thing. They've got a great history, but they are in the gutter now. And they don't recognize it. They've dragged the entire nation down into the gutter. And so now they have to live the life of a nation in the gutter. They don't have these great aspirations of statesmanship and everything. Those don't exist. It's going to take generations to rebuild that again. Go away, spam call. Whoa. That was weird. Is that voice controlled? When I said go away, it hung up after like one ring. Very interesting. And then on a related subject to this, so this Russian general being assassinated, I wake up every day and thank the Lord for the patience of the Russian people, but it's going to have a limit. Is this the limit? I don't know. But they're now assassinating within Moscow. They're going into the capital and assassinating generals. Imagine what the United States response would be if someone assassinated an American general in D.C. or in New York or anywhere in the U.S. Imagine how they would respond. And here, Russia knows full well what's happening. The only way that Europe can possibly drag themselves out of this crisis is if they somehow induce Russia into doing something so catastrophic and destructive that everyone else has no choice, but the entire world has to turn against them. They have to foment the war in order to save themselves, to be able to try to pay off all of their bondholders who they've promised Ukraine and all of its natural resources and a bunch of Russian resources, because they've got this delusional idea that they're going to like succeed in military conquest in Russia. It's pathologically insane, but these are pathologically insane people. And it's very, very clear that no matter what the posture overall for the Trump administration is, it's going to be on net at least coherent. Sergei Lavrov told Tucker, like, yeah, we have our back channels where you do like your public diplomacy, and then you have your back channels where you talk straight with each other. He's like, for the last several years, they've been saying the same thing on the back channels as they are in public. Just completely insane, juvenile, delusional stuff. These people who are in power, it's not just that they don't deserve to be in power, it's that they need to be institutionalized. They are psychologically equivalent to the video that I saw yesterday of a woman walking around in a park with a stroller full of 3 dolls. A full-grown woman with a stroller by herself with 3 dolls walking around in the park, and then like going down and like putting like blankets around them and tucking them in and picking them up and patting them and putting them back down. The people occupying the State Department and the intelligence services and the diplomats between primarily the US and the UK and then France and Germany, other states to a lesser degree, or other countries rather, these are psychologically equivalent to that. They're just the inheritors. They've stumbled their way ass backward into a system built by better men. And they've wrangled it to their own end because they have allies in the media who will run cover for them. And they have they've been blessed by having a very docile, feminized populace. So a related story here. NATO is from Mike Benz. NATO is building the largest NATO military base in all of Europe in Romania, right on Romania's Black Sea coast, pointing at Crimea, the crux point of contest in the Russia-Ukraine war. NATO feared the man who won Romania's now-canceled election would cut or shut the base down. And so this is from BalkanInsight.com, written March 21, 2024. Romania to host largest NATO military base in Europe. Work has begun on expanding the Mihail Kogalnicianu? No idea how you pronounce that. Base in Romania, transforming it into the largest NATO military base in Europe. Romania is a key Eastern member of NATO, and work is underway to enlarge the MK Air Base in Romania, which is only 60 miles from the border with Ukraine, to make it the alliance's largest in Europe. However, Georgescu's surprise win in Sunday's first-round poll prompted fears that he could close NATO bases in Romania or pull out of the military alliance altogether. The swing towards his brand of nationalist politics suggests that Romania is the latest NATO state bordering Ukraine after Hungary and Slovakia to succumb to Russian narratives on the conflict. Now, good friend of the show, Jason Miranchuk, has pointed out that Putin has been publicly making overtures to these, I don't want to say Eastern European because they're not even really European, these Slavic countries, indicating basically like your primary enemy is very obviously the West. They don't want you to join NATO or join the EU or ally with them for your own sake. They're not going to respect your cultures. They're not going to allow you to maintain any sort of sovereignty, as is evident here. The people, they're like, we want someone who's going to protect our folkways, protect our cultures. We're going to elect this guy to represent us because this is what everyone has told us is what you do when you want change. And then this supranational organization comes in and says, no. You're not electing that guy. No. You're not electing that guy because we don't trust that guy. That guy's not our guy. You're going to elect our guy. And if you don't, we're going to bomb you. If you do, we're going to bomb you as well. So, I don't know. Flip a coin. Until now, Romania has played a supportive role in the West's backing for Ukraine, opening the port of Constanta as a vital route to ship Ukrainian grain exports out and send military supplies in. Of course they have. Of course they've played a supportive role because they don't want to be the new front themselves. But this is the state of the leadership class at the head of the NATO governments right now. The war has also raised the strategic importance of the MK air base on the Black Sea, which is on course to become NATO's largest, but all that could change if Georgescu takes charge. NATO has particular reason to worry. Earlier this year, the alliance announced a $2.7 billion expansion at its MK base in Constanta on the Black Sea coast. When complete, it will be the largest NATO military base in Europe. Its presence underscores Romania's vital role in maintaining supply routes to Ukraine, facilitating Kiev's grain exports, and holding the front line in the West's deepening confrontation with Vladimir Putin's Russia. Yet if he has his way, Georgescu would cut aid to Ukraine and limit Romania's collaboration with NATO, which he believes makes the country a target. He is critical of the deployment of U.S. anti-missile batteries at Devaselu in southern Romania, which he deems unnecessarily provocative of Moscow. So what's happening? So this is just such a clusterfuck of clusterfucks. So you've got Europe going into probably the worst economic crisis they've experienced in, generations. And at the same time that that's happening, they are pissing off all of the fringe states because the only way they can keep this shell game going is by pulling in all these different fringe states. They tried funny business in the Georgian election, which is all the way on the other side of the Black Sea. It doesn't even have the remotest claim to being European. And this is the future for any of these fringe nations. It's becoming increasingly evident that if you continue to align your incentives with Europe, they're just going to drag you down into destruction. They're going to force you to submit yourself to all of these humiliations, just hollow out your all of your economy, all of your natural resources, just flood them all into these insane, never-ending wars, be impoverished for forever, completely cede your own sovereignty or your own even the pretense of self-determination. And if you don't cooperate, then you just become the new front. We're gonna send in our intelligence services and our media apparatuses to subvert your entire people against you, set you all at each other. And here, Russia's coming out looking pretty shiny. So these people who have like deep ethnic history, not very positive history, with Russia, are going to be increasingly looking at Russia and saying, yeah, I think that's the better of a couple of bad options. Like Romania, here's the thing about Romania is they can't really ever have the pretense of self-determination. I mean, they can have the pretense, but they can't actually have it. They're always going to be dependent upon some other larger power to stand guard over them. It's the same relationship that like we have to our respective governments as individuals. These little nations have the same relationship to the larger governments. So they're never going to actually have any sort of like self-determination granted to them by themselves. They're going to have to be a client to someone. For perspective, the new NATO this is back to Mike Benz. For perspective, the new NATO base in Romania under existential threat by the new democratically elected president of Romania, whose victory has now been canceled by the court, is set to be 50% bigger than the Ramstein base in Germany, NATO's largest base in Europe since 1953. And the reason I saw this little thread from Mr. Benz was because, oh, look at that. Elon Musk. Wow. Someone's paying attention. He also commented on Jeffrey Sachs' conversation with Tucker yesterday that has got the kosher right all up in arms at Tucker. Elon signal boosted it and said, this is a very interesting conversation, like very, very worth listening to. And in that, Jeffrey Sachs laid out explicitly that Israel controls U.S. foreign policy and has for at least 30 years. So it's gotten, this is all the kosher right are wringing their hands about Tucker giving over to the anti-Semitic pull. Meanwhile, Elon is signal boosting it. Related to this whole like toppling governments for the West, Biden paid Reuters $300 million for targeting Elon's companies. The Biden administration gave $300 million in government contracts to Reuters, while 11 federal agencies investigated Elon's businesses, Tesla, SpaceX, and X. During this time, Reuters received millions from these agencies and won a Pulitzer Prize for reporting on misconduct at Elon's companies. Never before has the grift been so evident. Even neutrals are like, wow, this is remarkably corrupt. This means taxpayer dollars funded media attacks on Elon. It's a coordinated effort to undermine one of America's most innovative leaders. Elon keeps building, they keep scheming. And this is from Mike Benz, who tweeted it out originally. West Coast Bill quote tweeted it and said Lawfare, and Elon said 100%. What stands out to me about this story is $300 million to a news organization that's owned by a bunch of Canadians. Reuters is Canada owned. $300 million for a media organization. Does Reuters even generate $300 million annually? $300 million is a shitload of money. They've just been, they're not even like trying to pretend. This is, you don't make these kinds of moves as a distributed bureaucracy if you don't have the hope or the expectation that you're going to be remaining in power. These are desperation moves to just, like, all the money that they're sending over to Ukraine. This is just like, it's got like some vague, like, because they need it explanation on it. And just funneling money right and left to all of their patrons as fast as they can. They sure seem to think that they're going to be no longer having access to the money spigot soon. Just looking at their behavior, that sure seems like what they're expecting. The $300 million to Reuters. If it was $300 million to like all news agencies, I'd be like, man, that's a lot of freaking money. What are you even like? What's the pretext for something like this? How do you get? Is there any justification you could put on this that a person would look at it and they'd be like, oh yeah, I could see that. I could see why they would be sending $300 million to them. Insane. To shit on Europe a little bit more here, because apparently that's the theme today. EU commits to internet satellite network as Starlink alternative. So they've given up on trying to lawfare Starlink to death. They've acquiesced, they've submitted, and they're going to build their own. The EU is committed to build a $11.13 billion constellation of satellites that will provide the bloc with encrypted global internet connectivity in a bid to provide a homegrown alternative to Elon Musk's Starlink. Now, here is the great... I'll open the article here. This is absolutely delicious. Oh, it's paywalled. Okay, whatever. Come back to the original tweet here. Browser's dragging. Joe Lonsdale, PayPal Mafia OG, says, I don't know SpaceX's internal numbers, but my guess is that they deploy well over 10,000 satellites for this cost, if not twice that, versus 290 of them by 2030. 290. So they've announced they're going to build an $11.13 billion constellation of satellites. For $11.13 billion, they're going to put up 290 satellites over the next 6 years. He says EU clowns lighting money on fire while shooting themselves in the foot. Elon said probably over 20,000 of the next-gen Starlink satellites will be deployed by then. 20,000 will be deployed by then versus 290 of them. This isn't a first world country or a first world region. I mean, I know the original definition of first world, second world, third world. But I'm saying in the way the colloquial parlance, the way it's used today. 290 satellites for $11.13 billion, and it takes 6 years. Meanwhile, Elon will have put up 20,000 next-gen stars. So these satellites are going to be much worse. There's no way they're going to be better. They're going to be much worse. I doubt they even get put up in the first place. Maybe they put up like 5. And they're like, look, we got our own. My European brethren, are you guys prepared for how bad it's going to get? You guys are going to be begging. You guys are going to be begging for Barron. Please, set us free. And where the hell are they going to get that money? $11.13 billion. Who's going to give that money to him? Oh, man. Mr. Westford says, just caught up and Matt sounds high as hell. Yes, I am sick. The sickness finally got to me. I am down with the sickness. I'm starting to feel the Dayquil that I took about 36 minutes ago. But I press on. So Mark Andreessen, I mentioned that he's been doing a bunch of really interesting conversations lately, and he just had one with Chris Williamson, a friend of the show, Chris Williamson, from the Modern Wisdom podcast. And they were talking about Elon, and he was talking about the way that Elon functions as an executive, and it's remarkable. First of all, my Stormy Waters appreciators out there will appreciate the reference here at the very beginning, rather significant. But then I'm just grateful that we get to live at a time when we have a man like this. I wish we had more. Would that we had more. Thankfully, I know based on how memetics works that we've got more coming because a guy like Elon exists. So say whatever you want about all the rest of his proclivities or whatever. He is undeniably an absolutely revolutionary, exceptional executive.
I'm not aware of another current CEO who operates the way that he does. But if you go back in history, you find characters more like him, especially like the industrialists of the late 1800s, early 1900s. People like Henry Ford or Andrew Carnegie or Thomas Watson, who built IBM. If you go back and read the biographies of people like that, Andrew Mellon, Cornelius Vanderbilt, like those guys ran very similar to the way that
Andrew Mellon, close followers of Kingpilled on Twitter, at Real Kingpilled, or followers of Stormy appreciators, that Mellon name will stand out to you. Because Andrew Mellon was the grandfather of Timothy Mellon, who was the largest single contributor, apart from perhaps Elon, the largest single contributor in financial terms to Trump in this last election cycle.
That Elon runs things. The top line thing is just this incredible devotion from the leader of the company to fully, deeply understand what the company does and to be, completely knowledgeable about every aspect of it and to be in the trenches and talking directly to the people who do the work, deeply understanding the issues and, being the lead problem solver in the organization. And basically what Elon does is he shows up every week at each of his companies. He identifies the biggest problem that the company's having that week and he fixes it, right? And then he does that every week for 52 weeks in a row. And then each of his companies has solved the 52 biggest problems that year. And, most other large companies are still having the planning meeting, for the pre-planning meeting, for the board meeting, for the presentation, for the this, with the compliance review and the legal review. And so he's just like, it's this level of both like incredible intellectual capability coupled with incredible force of personality, moral authority, execution capability, focus on fundamentals, that is just like really amazing to watch. And then, by the way, the side effect of it is he attracts, many of the best people in the world to work with him. Because if you work with Elon, like the expectations are through the roof in terms of your level of performance, and he is going to know who you are, and he's going to know what you've done, and he's going to know what you've done this week, and he's going to know if you're underperforming, and he may fire you in the meeting if you're not carrying your weight. But if you are as committed to the company as he is and working hard and capable, many people who have worked for him say that they had the best experience of their lives when they were working for him.
Kate says, hearing this makes me think Bill Gates is the fake meat version of Elon Musk. That's really funny. Bill Gates is like beyond Elon, like a Beyond Burger version of Elon. I'm just imagining, like I sit here and so consider everything that Elon put on the line in this past election cycle. Like he was fully aware of the fact that if this gambit doesn't work out, like I'm getting arrested. I'm going to prison. I will not be the wealthiest man in the world anymore. I will be the number one villain on the entire planet if this whole thing does not work out. So he's fully aware that that's hanging over him. That's behind him at all times, lurking, lingering behind him, nipping at his heels. So he has every incentive in the world to take this approach and apply it to the goal that he has set his mind on now. As Peter Thiel said yesterday, don't bet against Elon. Like, you don't have to be an Elon fanboy to recognize that people who bet against Elon lose. And Elon has said, I want $2 trillion cut out of the budget. I want these regulatory agencies kneecapped. And I'm going to put my life on the line to ensure that that happens. So if 2 plus 2 equals 4, then I would say that there's extremely good odds that Elon experiences a tremendous amount of success. And even if he experiences like 20% success, this is the one great failure that he ever has. He puts everything on the line and he fails catastrophically because whatever. Even if he gets 10% of this, we're in a better place than we were before. But only if there is a wave of people behind him ready to immediately step into whatever gaps open up. Doesn't matter where the gap is. If a gap opens up, there should be people who are ready to immediately step into that, build it, and begin establishing themselves in that gap. That's how you ensure that the gap stays open and gets pried open even further. But if everyone's just a spectator and they're just like, oh yeah, Elon, go in there and bludgeon everything and make it all better for us. Oh, you failed. If he fails, it's going to be because there weren't sufficient people behind him filling in the space that he was opening up. The more people who flood in and fill this space economically, financially, whatever, across whatever domain, culturally, the more people who flood in and establish themselves in that place, the harder it is to paper over those gaps. And each one of these gaps represents a crack in the armor of the existing managerialist regime.
And so then there's this attraction thing. And that's why I think his companies compound the way they do. And people look at this from the outside and they're like, how can people tolerate this guy? And And inside the company, people are like, finally. There's a famous line. Somebody used to work in one of the other aerospace companies and went to work at SpaceX and said that's what it was like. And he said, it's like being dropped into a shocking zone of competence. Everybody around me is like so absolutely competent. And look, most of us never have that experience. Most people are never in an organization where like the bar is held that high. And as a consequence,
imagine working somewhere where you could describe it as a shocking zone of competence. In the world of the competency crisis, Elon's organizations are described as shocking zones of competence. And I can't really think of anything that could be more red-pilling to someone, to a complete and utter normie, than working in an environment like that and then turning on the news and seeing how people talk about Elon and his companies. That's got to be pretty radicalizing itself. Like, Tesla shareholders are probably just about ready to take up arms right now over this whole compensation plan thing. They're learning good and hard that they don't have a voice. They don't have the voice that they thought they did. That's a big wake-up call, and you can't put that away very easily.
Competence level is so high and stays so high and even rises over time. And again, to his massive credit, he has been able to do that repeatedly. And I don't know if you'd agree with this, but the way I think about it is he actually delegates almost everything. Like, he's not involved in most of the things that his companies are doing. He's involved in the thing that is the biggest problem right now until that thing is fixed. And then he doesn't have to be involved in it anymore. And then he can go focus on the next thing that's the biggest problem for that company right now. So like for example, manufacturing, there's this concept of the bottleneck, right? And so in any manufacturing chain, there's always some bottleneck. There's always something that is keeping the manufacturing line from running the way that it's supposed to. And sometimes the bottleneck is at the beginning of the process. It's like we can't get enough raw material. Sometimes the bottleneck is at the end of the process. We don't have enough warehouses for the finished product, or the bottleneck might be somewhere in the middle. And if you run a manufacturing company, there's always a bottleneck. Whatever the bottleneck is holding everything up. And the job number one is to remove that bottleneck and get everything flowing again. And I think he basically has universalized that concept, and he basically looks at every company like it's some sort of conceptual assembly line, sometimes a literal assembly line, making cars and rockets, and basically any given week there's a bottleneck. there's guaranteed to be the main bottleneck. There's going to be one thing that's going to be the thing that's holding people back. And so the answer to your question, the resolution of the paradox is I'm going to micromanage the solution of that. I don't need to manage everything else because everything else by definition is running better than that, right? And so I can go focus on that. The other part of it is so compelling, and this is where I think a lot of especially non-technical CEOs would really struggle to implement the method, is when he identifies the bottleneck, he goes and he talks to the line engineers who understand the technical nature of the bottleneck. And if it's people on a manufacturing line, he's talking to people directly on the line, or if that's people in a software development group, he's talking to the people actually writing the code, right? So he's not asking the VP of engineering to ask the director of engineering, to ask the manager, to ask the individual contributor to write a report for, that's to be reviewed in 3 weeks. He doesn't do that. What he does is he goes and personally finds the engineer who actually has the knowledge about the thing, and then he sits in the room with that engineer and fixes the problem with them. Right. And again, this is why he inspires such incredible loyalty from the especially the technical people who he works with, which is they're just like, wow, if I'm up against a problem I don't know how to solve, freaking Elon Musk is going to show up.
I can call on the guy that owns the company.
Freaking Elon Musk is going to show up in his Gulfstream and he's going to sit with me overnight in front of the keyboard or in front of the manufacturing line, and he's going to help me figure this out. And this is the thing. It's like, okay, you're like a normal CEO running a normal company. Like, how can you possibly compete with that? I'm not aware.
Yeah, how can you possibly compete with that? It's funny. Shanzat Chamali says Andreesen on 2x is too much. That was Andreesen on 1 1/4. I listened to Andreesen on 2x. I sit here like kind of like, come on, talk faster. Really, Elon is just he's like the personal the essence of the repudiation of the managerial spirit. Everything about that is anti-managerial. Cut through all of the bureaucracy, cut through all of the inefficient processes. He mentions, I can't remember if he said it in this clip or somewhere else in the conversation, he said that there is a standard running policy in Elon's companies for all the employees that if you're in a meeting and you don't have anything to contribute and you're not getting anything out of it, just get up and leave. He's very anti-meeting. He's like, we're going to have the minimal number of meetings we have to, and if you're in a meeting, don't be there just kind of like futzing around and taking a break. Get out and get productive again. So then, on a related note here, I'm please brace yourselves. I have to give you guys a little bit of cringe, but there's a reason for it. So Milei went on the least interesting podcast of all time, the most AstroTurf podcast of all time, Lex Friedman. Lex frickin' Friedman is interviewing heads of state. It's just fantastic. What an artifact of our time. So he asked him about Doge, and this is what Milei said, and then I have some comments on the whole concept here. Here, let's make this a little faster.
Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy are heading the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency. So from your experience this year as president of Argentina and every chainsaw economic policies that you've implemented, what advice would you give to Elon and Vivek about how to do it in the United States?
Just cut to the chase. Simple as that. Currently in Argentina, due to the political balance we've achieved, we have had certain powers delegated from Congress to the executive branch, and therefore we can resolve it by decree. The regulation minister, Federico Sturzenegger, in his ministry, shows a
Argentinian named Federico Sturzenegger.
counter that displays in front of everyone there, during which the delegated powers will continue to be valid. Therefore, he has a whole deregulation division, also a public spending cut division, and government structure reduction division. And he also has an elite core that's cleaning up all of the laws that hinder the economic system. And every day, he removes between 1 and 5 economic restrictions. So my advice would be for them to go all the way, to push it to the very limit. And do not give up. Do not let down their guard, because at the end of the day, you are removing privileges. Of course, there will be people complaining, but these are people who are losing privileges, so they will have to explain to society why they are keeping those privileges. And that is quite uncomfortable.
So I don't trust Milei. I think that the fact that all the Lolberts love Milei and Hans Hermann Hoppe is not a fan that's honestly reason enough. But just generally speaking, I don't trust Milei. But here's the good thing: I don't need to. I don't care. He's the president of some shithole country. Now, I mean, Argentina seems very nice, but he's some president of some other country. I don't care. What I do care about is the Bill to Caesar that Jason coined several months ago. That now you have guys like Milei, Bukele, who have done some of these things. So Bukele has the crackdown on crime. He has the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Milei has the slashing government spending and firing a whole bunch of or laying off a whole bunch of government employees. The fact that those exist now means that it makes it more real. It makes it more possible for the Trump administration to actually do these things because they can point to these other examples. Look, Argentina did it, and look at the success that they had. It makes it real. It now is, instead of some sort of speculative thing, there's a framework to build around. That doesn't solve you can obviously come up with all sorts of counters to that, but it reifies it. It gives it some substance from the beginning. And the more that different countries start doing this sort of thing, the more countries are going to start doing this sort of thing. Same thing applies to Bitcoin. The more countries begin to adopt Bitcoin, the more countries are going to adopt Bitcoin. Same with people, same with companies. You hit a certain point where you start experiencing these network effects that just kind of there's like a spirit that just carries the project forward as people begin to just accept it as normal. It was very useful to have someone like Milei, regardless of what else he stands for, who his handlers are, whatever. Having him as an example for this particular application is very, very useful. And he actually, his comments here are very good. Like, push it to the very limit. Those who are losing privileges will have to explain to society why they want to keep them. I think privileges might be, like, Americans probably say benefits, because he's speaking specifically of the unfunded liabilities primarily. That's what this speaks to me. And that's the biggest, like the most potentially fraught territory that they're going to have to tread, is figuring out how to massively diminish those unfunded liabilities because they never should have been offered in the first place. And you just gotta rip the Band-Aid off at some point. Funny story here. Trump is eyeing privatizing the U.S. Postal Service. This from New York Post. President-elect Donald Trump has expressed interest in taking the U.S. Postal Service private as the federal agency hemorrhages billions of dollars, according to a report. He's discussed the issue with Howard Lutnick, his pick for Commerce Secretary, at his Mar-a-Lago residence in Palm Beach, Florida, the Washington Post reported, citing 3 people with knowledge of the matter. After learning of the agency's annual financial losses, Trump said the government should not be responsible for subsidizing the Postal Service, the sources said. The Postal Service has lost an astounding $9.5 billion during the fiscal year ending September 30th, up from a loss of $6.5 billion the previous year, it reported in November. The agency, which had a total operating revenue of nearly $80 billion, blamed its financial bleeding on non-cash contributions to worker compensations. So this is Tom Luongo has said this, that maybe someone else, I can't remember, but he said that all these different federal employees are effectively on a UBI. Like, they have a universal basic income. They're given make work programs to justify this UBI because you can't fire them. They're grossly overpaid relative to the market. You can't fire them. They basically can't be held to any standards of efficiency. This is effectively UBI. Privatizing the federal agency could send shockwaves across the shipping industry, affecting small businesses and rural communities, in addition to potentially gutting hundreds of thousands of federal jobs, the Washington Post reported. If they actually privatized it, that would absolutely not be the case. I mean, it may be temporarily, but the whole notion of privatizing it would be that somebody would run it in a much more efficient fashion. It could also have drastic effects on the e-commerce industry, with companies like Amazon relying on the Postal Service for last-mile delivery between their fulfillment centers and customers' homes or businesses. They probably aren't going to have to rely on the Postal Service any longer if they can do delivery via drone. There's an interesting wrinkle. Trump has long had a fraught relationship with the Postal Service. In his first administration during the early days of the pandemic, he called the agency a joke and said he wouldn't provide any stimulus loans unless it quadrupled its package prices. A Postal Service spokesperson told the Washington Post that under its modernization plan, it has cut 45 million work hours over the past 3 years and slashed transportation costs by $2 billion. So, okay, hold on here. I missed this the first time around. They've lost $9.5 billion, up from, or down from, I suppose, $6.5 billion the previous year. And they cut 45 million work hours over the past 3 years and slashed transportation costs by $2 billion. And they still managed like a 50% greater loss. Insane. And then Elon Musk agrees that on top of privatizing the U.S. Postal Service, Americans should be able to opt out of receiving physical mail and choose digital delivery instead. Imagine that. Imagine living in 2024 and having it be rather revolutionary that someone would suggest you should be able to opt out of junk mail. Think about how much waste happens every single year because of all the junk mail. We go get the mail a couple times a week, and every single time we do, there's like maybe 2 pieces of relevant mail, and then like 20 pieces of just absolute shit. Just complete junk. Someone, somewhere, is creating the copy for this stuff, doing the design, the digital design, printing all these things off, putting them in envelopes. I'm sure a lot of it is automated, but there's someone managing this automation process to send absolute shit that just gets thrown in the trash immediately. This is absurd. There's probably billions of dollars being wasted in collective productivity and resources and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Probably tens of billions in just junk mail that has no reason for existing. Absolutely. Get rid of it all. How much do you think it would change the price of shipping stuff without all of that? Maybe that's what's been subsidizing it, and that's why we've had such a, maybe the prices are way lower than they should be. But even then, in 2024, we have to like worry about how much it's going to cost to ship something. There's no reason that all of these different landmines of inefficiency and corruption and total waste should exist. I do not care about your political persuasion. If you're going to start going to town on this stuff and getting rid of it, please do. Let's live in a first world country that's actually competent and efficient and functional. Another USPS story here. The Biden administration has spent $3 billion on electric mail trucks. Only 93 have been built. They've also spent $7.5 billion on electric vehicle charging stations. Only 7 have been built. 7! They've spent over $1 billion on each charging station. $1 billion on a charging station. $3 billion on electric mail trucks for 93. So how many? 32.3 million dollars per electric mail truck. Why would you make it look like this? Defense contractor Oshkosh had only delivered 93 trucks by November compared to 3,000 originally expected by now. The delays put Biden's climate goals at risk. Biden's $7.5 billion investment in EV charging has only produced 7 stations in 2 years. The network of fast chargers promised by the Biden administration has had a painfully slow rollout. Yes, Bryce nails it. Say it with me, folks. Money laundering. That's all this is. These are just money laundering scams. The people undertaking all of this are criminals of the highest order. This is just rank criminality. Okay, let's get to this next one here. Shout out to Catholic Orthodoxy, also known as Politically Catholic, a regular in the chat. Says, whoever's telling you that Trump won't return lawfare to his political opponents obviously can't read the headlines because he's done it several times now already. So there's a report. Trump officially sues the Des Moines Register and Ann Seltzer over the Harris +3 Iowa poll, ultimately wrong by 16 points. It accused them of brazen election interference and consumer fraud. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and other Democrats online also had the poll ahead of time and were boasting about it before its release. And this is an excerpt from the filing. The stray tweet referenced in the Semaphore article was posted by Ryan at Illinois Lib at 6:15 p.m. Eastern on November 2, so 3 days before the election, has now been viewed over 1 million times. He said, Seltzer is about to drop Kamala +3. Source, major campaign surrogate. Not joking, mark my words. So here's the article about it from Politico. And I went and I read the entire filing. It was like 25 pages. Trump sues Iowa pollster over survey that showed Harris ahead. Trump ultimately won Iowa by more than 13 points. But that does not stop the president-elect from legal action against pollster J. Ann Seltzer. President-elect Donald Trump is suing retired Iowa pollster J. Ann Seltzer over her pre-election survey that showed Vice President Kamala Harris leading in the state, calling it brazen election interference. The shock poll, which drew national attention given Seltzer's record of success in Iowa, proved incorrect. Trump won the state by more than 13 points. But that has not stopped the president-elect from claiming that the poll was intended to manipulate the results of the election. Quote, while Seltzer is not the only pollster to engage in this corrupt practice, she had a huge platform and following, and thus a significant and impactful opportunity to deceive voters. The lawsuit also represents an escalation of Trump's pledge to more aggressively pursue litigation against media he views as unfair to him. The case against Seltzer comes just after Trump settled another media lawsuit with ABC News and its political anchor, George Slopadopoulous, for $15 million, which, amusingly, is George Slopadopoulos's annual salary. He's being paid $15 million annually to produce nothing of value. And then he just got them sued, and they had to settle for the amount of his salary. I think you should go without pay for a year. The lawsuit against Seltzer was filed in Polk County, Iowa, under the Iowa Consumer Fraud Act. Trump's lawyers argue that incorrect polls force Republicans to, quote, divert campaign time and money to areas in which they are ahead, as well as, quote, deceives the public into believing that Democrat candidates are performing better than they really are. So they're suing them on fraud grounds, claiming that they're suing her polling agency, the Des Moines Register, and what's the name of the media company that owns Des Moines? Des Moines Register owner. Can't type. Gannett, which is also which major? Is it the USA Today, I think? That they own, America Mass Media Holding Company. It owns the national newspaper USA Today, as well as several local newspapers, and then a whole list of them here. Speaking to a local PBS station on Friday before the lawsuit had been filed, Seltzer says she's taking Trump's allegations very seriously, but added that she's, quote, mystified about what motivation anybody thinks I had and would act on in such a public poll. I don't know. It doesn't seem very surprising to me. The idea that I intentionally set up to deliver this response when I've never done that before. I've had plenty of opportunities to do it, she said. It's not my ethic. Oh, yes, I'm sure you're very ethical. Trump announced his plans to sue during his Mar-a-Lago press conference on Monday. I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing this because I feel I have an obligation to, he said. Also named in Trump's lawsuit is the Des Moines Register, which published Seltzer's poll, and its parent company, Gannett. Statement from the Des Moines Register. When asked for comment, Gannett sent the Register a statement. Seltzer announced 2 weeks after the election that she would be retiring from election polling. Would I have liked to make this announcement after a final poll aligned with Election Day results? Of course, she wrote. It's ironic that it's just the opposite. Trump's lawsuit claims that Seltzer's poll was not just wrong, as many polls are, but instead was an attempt to influence the outcome of the 2024 presidential election. So I read through the entire filing, and they make a fairly compelling case. I have no idea if it's going to be successful, but part of this is the part of the punishment is the lawsuit itself, and it's establishing whether it's successful or not. It's at least beginning to establish a pretext for going after people for this sort of thing. I actually think that they may have a decent chance of being successful because that was not the only poll that was wrong. there was 2 other polls that she did for local Iowa races that she missed by 13 points and 11 points. And they missed in favor of the Democrat. And so they lay out a pretty significant case that this was done intentionally, that you don't just like accidentally get this wrong. And they listed a few others where she's been very strangely wrong, and it's always wrong in the direction of Democrats in key races, and it creates damages here because, number one, you have the people are being influenced by the polls, and that's one thing that this may establish a precedent for, is that pollsters have a responsibility to poll accurately because of the way that people are influenced by polls. And then their monetary damages are, they have to redirect, if they're assuming this poll is accurate because she's got this track record of being very, very accurate, then we have to take this seriously, which means we need to redirect resources to actually campaigning in this area. So we redirected massive amounts of resources and spent time and money and stress and heartache and all of this stuff because she engaged in blatant fraud. And so they're calling polling a service, and it falls under the consumer fraud statute because they're providing a service. And if they're providing the service knowingly fraudulently, then the person doing that and the media companies that are facilitating it are liable for that fraudulent behavior. That's essentially the basis of the suit. And as Andrew said, there's a clear track record now here of him. He's definitely going to engage in this lawfare, and this is good. It's good for him to do this because at the very, think if he actually wins something like this, that's going to have like a ripple effect through the whole polling world. People are going to get a lot more serious because the polling's not going away. People are going to get real serious about making sure that their polls are accurate because they don't want to be the next one to get sued by the war chest of Trump and Elon and their associates. Okay, an interesting little story here that dropped just before I went live. More white pills? Are we back? Breaking. A federal judge has ruled for Derek Chauvin and ordered that George... Excuse me. Voice is starting to go. A federal judge has ruled for Derek Chauvin and ordered that George Floyd's heart tumor must be tested to determine if it played a role in his death. The information about the heart tumor was not presented to Chauvin in the trial. I somehow missed this. Was this common knowledge that George Floyd had a heart tumor? And George Floyd had a heart tumor, and it was not ascertained whether it played a role in his death, and the information was not presented to him at the trial. This is insane.
Certainly the very first legal win for Derek Chauvin. And we've been reporting all of it over here at Alpha News. But this is a federal judge who has finally come back approving this motion that has been in the works for months to examine heart tissue in George Floyd and also some fluids from George Floyd's body as well. And basically this is related to
fluids from his body? How do they still have fluids from his body? Bryce says, do they still have the dude on ice? Maybe they're talking about like the results from the fluids. They still have the records of that and they need to review that. Do they actually have fluids from his body?
To what's called a paraganglioma. This was discussed in the fall of Minneapolis. Some doctors came forward during Derek Chauvin's case to say, why wasn't this tumor tested in George Floyd? In many cases, it can lead to sudden cardiac death. They brought this information forward. His attorney at the time did not act upon this information according to court documents. And also the Judge Peter Cahill ignored it as well. So in this motion, the judge has now said that this testing can take place. What really, does this tumor have anything to do with his death? A lot of people are also picking up on the fact that George Floyd was not pronounced dead until about 9:30 that night. That's about an hour after this incident took place, something that we brought out in the documentary as well. So it's interesting that I think people are willing to have these conversations now to look at this evidence, which is really in black and white and has been since day one, which we compiled for the book, They're Lying, and for the documentary, the Fall of Minneapolis. So this really is the very first legal win for Derek Chauvin. We've also done some reporting about a state appeal as well that is similar, the fact that these medical records were ignored.
I'm calling it now. I'm calling it now. He's going to get exonerated. We're going to get another one. We're back. We're back. We're on the ascendancy. Straight Buster said they're making George Droid. And Bryce said they have him in the crystal. Oh, man. I mean, imagine if a federal judge it's such a crazy sentence. A federal judge has ordered that George Floyd's heart tumor must be tested to determine if it played a role in his death. After we convicted the guy, maybe we should check and see if his heart tumor played a role in him dying. A little oversight. In Vengeful Sun news, a poll from Emerson: was the killing of UNH CEO acceptable for ages 18 to 29? 41% said it was acceptable. 40% said it was not acceptable. I strongly recommend you go listen to two things. Number one, Pete's most recent episode with Stormy that just dropped. They talk about this at length, and I wholeheartedly co-sign everything they say in there. Number two, go listen to the one that, or you could read it, I suppose, but I listened to it. Charles Haywood's recent publication to his YouTube channel, the podcast feed, called On Private Justice, where he muses on the role of private justice as a necessary fill-in where public justice fails. It's kind of a thorny topic, but I think he navigates it very well. Clearly, I do not think that gunning down CEOs in the streets is a good thing to do. I don't think that this is, I don't endorse it. I don't think that more CEOs should be gunned down in the streets. I don't think that this is a positive development. Most of all for whoever's pulling the trigger. However, when you have people engaged in such flagrant criminal behavior that's somehow legally sanctioned because of the complete degeneracy of the current legal system, what are you going to say? This sort of thing is going to happen eventually. And another thought here from Andrew. He says, if I were a CEO in a highly unpopular industry, I'd be very worried by this data point. Worth considering how they might go about solving this. I don't think personal security is the answer. Yes, there's a number of different things. I do think personal security is probably one thing that's going to be on the rise. I think Elon Musk is going to have a whole new contingent of consumers for his robots. But I also think that this is going to serve as as Charles Haywood said, it's good and salutary if the massively malevolent, corrupt, and evil elites within our society, it's very good and salutary if they live with the possibility, knowing that something like this could happen to them. That's not to endorse it happening to them, but it's good if they have the fear that something like this could happen, because perhaps that will constrain their behavior, if nothing else. The knowledge that at any point it could be all over, and so I better mind my P's and Q's. That's a good and healthy sense for people to have. I've said before on the show here that if you know that casually insulting someone might get you pulled out in the yard to, march 15 paces and draw down on each other, you're going to be a lot less likely to casually insult someone. This is good. It's healthy and salutary. So, and yeah, when people do really, really evil things, like the entire insurance industry, and they are not held to account through a system of public justice, invariably a system of private justice is going to be employed. The way to solve this problem is to ensure that the public justice system is just. And then lastly, I got a couple of just interesting thoughts here. Not really related to anything in particular, but one of the best posters, Lee, had a good thought here. He's quote tweeting Zero HP Lovecraft. He says Zero HP says it's getting harder and harder to discern what is real from what is fake. Fake screenshots, edited or selectively edited documents, lies on top of artifice, on top of deception. Everyone just believes whatever they want. And this was, I believe, sparked by the rumor that went around that was held on to for quite a while, and I think some people may still believe it, that the girl who shot up the Christian school had shouted out "Radfem Hitler." If you don't know who Radfem Hitler is, don't worry about it. You don't need to. This is very bizarre, deep internet lore that you're better off not knowing about it. But Radfem Hitler went and deleted her account because everyone thought that it was real. She mentioned her in the manifesto, and she actually didn't. It wasn't true. But I think that's probably what sparked his thought here. And Lee had a good response. He said, "It's biblical. As we build our digital Tower of Babel, God once again makes us incomprehensible to one another. We cannot discern signal from noise, and scatters the various people groups back to their own distinct realms. Blue Sky, Reddit, right-wing Twitter, etc." I think it's a very good point. It is part of the reason why it's very difficult to predict the future, because it's tough to tell when the natural constraining mechanisms that are built into the fabric of reality, reflecting the order of our creator, when they're going to kick in. But we're seeing this is kind of maybe a microcosm of, I believe, what's happening on the macro scale geopolitically. We've had this globalized, everyone's all penetrated into each other, giggity, and everything's getting worse and worse. And so there's this natural incentive here where everyone just begins to withdraw from one another again. So the Tower of Babel represents the human desire for empire. But in the act of building an empire, invariably we stretch beyond our means. We can't sustain it any longer, and so there's this natural withdrawal again, and a retrenchment. You could almost think of it as like the breathing pattern of the life of broader society. There's an expanse, and then a retraction, or a contraction, and then an expansion, and then a contraction, and an expansion and a contraction. And you can track this in the cycles, the peaks and valleys of an empire grows, and then it falls and collapses, and both of these tendencies are existing concurrently at different levels of scale. So the internet is like this thing that causes this ability to massively globalize. But then, like the story just a minute ago, the EU is like, oh, well, we're going to build our own Starlink. Because suddenly you realize, wait a second, when I don't completely control this global system, when someone else is beginning to threaten my power base, suddenly I don't want everyone to all use the same infrastructure. We want to have our own infrastructure. So I think this is a trajectory that is going to define the next probably several decades, where we're just going to see a general across the board contraction or withdrawal from globalist impulse. There's still going to be transnational organizations because in the same way that the internet created some of the largest, most globalized companies of all time, while simultaneously enabling, like anybody can be an entrepreneur through the internet. Basically, you get both of these. You get the massive collectivization and then the massive individuation at the same time. So there's still going to be these global transnationalist organizations, but there's also going to be a rise in much more localized power centers, and this will exist at all levels of scale. And then another interesting thought here. This is from Wrath of Non on Twitter. His first tweet here, he said, this is a subject I've spent far too much time thinking about for decades now. One reason we don't create great art or raise geniuses anymore is our fake rationality, our fake meritocracy. We have no religion and no interest in piety or beauty. We value what makes money, what moves fast, what makes great noise, what spans vast distances, and what most effectively covers, smothers, and obfuscates. Our saints are the businessmen, the politicians, the PhDs. We worship money, and we're spending everything we have to get it. Health, love, nature, beauty, piety. Nothing will remain. And then he quoted himself, and he said, "It would be nice if we got another Mozart or Michelangelo, but it isn't going to happen. We don't have the heart for it anymore. The soil isn't there anymore. It takes generations of people fiddling away at home with their neighbors on dark winter nights to raise a decent composer. It takes generations of writers constantly reading, testing, living the canon to raise a Milton or Shakespeare. Now people want instant success or nothing. We need, as a culture, to stop consuming and start creating. There should be a metal band in every garage, a string quartet in every little publisher's office, a choir in every police station. And they need to have pride in their roots. They need a terroir, to borrow a concept from wine. They need a Sibelius who will compose their music because he's so damned proud of being a fen. They need a center. In the centrifugal force of modernism, every bond of affection or force is obliterated. We are all atomized. You can't expect to reap anything good when the soil is dead and all is air. But we can change this, and it will be the most important thing we ever do. Teach all of our children music. Let a billion souls sing. Leave no child ignorant in the basic arts of drawing, sculpture, dance. What else are we here for? A planet teeming with billions and unprecedented wealth, and we can't compose a single opera that will rouse men to stand up and shout themselves hoarse to save our lives? A single movie that will inspire a million young couples to start the greatest adventure in the history of mankind, the family? In the words of the old poet, turn off the damned radio and take the fiddle down from the wall. This part here where he says, there should be a metal band in every garage, a string quartet in every little publisher's office, a choir in every police station. This makes me think of the 80s and the 90s. Thinking of the grunge bands that would start out in somebody's garage. I played the video several episodes ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. I just forgot the name of the band. It's left my brain. I've got Dayquil brain. The well-known pop band. The two guys playing on their keyboard and dancing to this like 20 years ago. We've had our spirits suppressed, weighed down. You could call it the longhouse or whatever it is, but something has been weighing our spirits down, and it's sapped our creative energy. But now, with this vibe shift, with this ascendancy, this opportunity for building American things, this isn't just a commercial opportunity. There's also a creative opportunity. With the rise of AI, there's going to be an increased demand for authentic music, for real human experience. And this is one of those constraining forces that the doomsayers can't factor in. You know, you hear all these tales of woe and doom about AI, and it's just going to take over and dominate everything, and we're all going to live in our pods and eat the bugs and wear our VR goggles and be completely detached from the rest of the world. Some people will be there. Yes, that's going to happen with some people. But what happens because we're human beings, the proliferation of the fake increases the value of the good, of the real. It creates demand for the real. So the more that people propagate the fake, the false, the non-real, the more the demand grows for the true, the authentic, the real. There's a positive feedback loop here, where those who actually set their minds to creating something authentic and real, to being creative and productive rather than degenerative and consumptive, there's increased demand for that, which means you can be compensated more and more for it. And so both of these forces will continue simultaneously, each incentivizing the other. This is why it's silly to doomsay about AI or whatever the technology of the day that everyone's fearful of. It's silly to doomsay about it. Like, yes, there's going to be bad things that happen from it. People said the same thing about electricity, and yeah, they were right. Lots of bad things have happened because of the proliferation of electricity. Lots of bad things have happened because of the proliferation of the internet. Lots of bad things have happened because of the proliferation of the oil trade. But lots of good things happen too. And this is the human experience. The bad things are going to happen and the good things are going to happen. Are you going to be someone who focuses yourself on the good things and contributing to the production of good things? Or are you just going to focus on the bad things and just assume that evil is going to ultimately win the day? Because that's what the apocalyptic thinking is directionally pointed toward, the assumption that evil is going to win the day. If we know that evil is not going to win the day, if we recognize this pattern, that as the evil grows, so does the good. The proliferation of falsehood creates a desire for the truth. Then we can dedicate our energy toward the propagation of what is true and what is good. We can be productive rather than simply consumptive. Last thing I got for you guys today here is I'm going to hit you guys right in the soul, because I want you, especially my men out there, to reach out to your dads. Tell them that you love them. Whether you've talked to them today or not, just hit them up. Tell them that you love them. We live in an era of great cynicism, especially toward older generations. There's a lot of generational conflict. And I encountered this this video earlier. It auto-played while I was setting up the show. And it got me good. My reaction to this was hitting up my dad, telling him I love him, and going down and hugging my son. This is probably the reason I saved this for the very end, is because there's a good chance that maybe it takes the stream down or something, and it may get copyright struck later on. Whatever, it's worth it to me. So if you're listening to this afterwards and I had to cut it off, I had to cut off the end of the show to allow for keeping the YouTube channel, then you can go listen to it on X. I'm streaming there at Real King Pilled, or the podcast version should have it as well. But this, you can also go listen to the song yourself. I recommend watching the music video. The song is Monsters by James Blunt. Oh, come on. It doesn't have the audio. It's not working. Okay, so I tried to do the workaround. It didn't work. I'm going to do it the riskier way. So be it. I'm just going to play the YouTube version of it. And bear with me a sec here. Go into my history. It worked earlier, but it's not now. And here it is.
Oh, before they turn off all the lights, I won't read you your wrongs or your rights. The time has gone. I'll tell you good night, close the door. Tell you I love you once more. The time has gone, so here it is. I'm not your son, you're not my father. We're just two grown men saying goodbye. No need to forgive, no need to forget. I know your mistakes and you know mine. And while you're sleeping, I'll try to make you proud. So daddy, won't you just close your eyes? Don't be afraid. It's my time to chase the monsters away. Oh, well, I'll read a story to you. Only difference is this one is true. The time has gone. I folded your clothes on the chair. I hope you sleep well, don't be scared. Time has gone. So here it is. I'm not your son. You're not my father. We're just two grown men saying goodbye. No need to forgive. No need to forget. I know your mistakes and you know mine. And while you're sleeping, I'll try to make you proud. So daddy, won't you just close your eyes? Don't be afraid. It's my time to chase the monsters away. Sleep a lifetime, yes, and breathe the last word. You can feel my hand on your arm. I will be the last one, so I'll leave a light on. Let there be no darkness in your heart. But I'm not your son. You're not my father. We're just two grown men saying goodbye. No need to forgive. No need to forget. I know your mistakes and you know mine. And while you're sleeping, I'll try to make you proud. So daddy, won't you just close your eyes? Don't be afraid. It's my time to chase the monsters away.
Yes, that's his real dad. The story behind it was that was a poem that was written by his sister when his dad in 2020 he got a kidney transplant, and there was a lot of complications around it, and they didn't expect him to make it, and so he recorded that song. Yeah, tell your dad that you love him. Remember, our time is short. Time flies by, and we got to make the most of each day, make the most of each moment. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 3,700. Appreciate you guys. Biblical Anarchy, $2 super chat. He says, it got real dusty in here. Yeah, I managed to hold it together just a little bit more now than I did earlier, but I was straight up tears, just wet cheeks. It reminded me of what Stormy Waters has been talking about how there's a number of people lately who, a lot of guys resonated with this, that just suddenly feeling like you're going through menopause. That there's I don't know, the membrane is thin between our world and the other one, and you can feel it sometimes. So appreciate you guys. Depending on how I feel, I might be back for another ASTROLABE tomorrow. If not, then just follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilt. I'll let you guys know there. And for now, I give you guys Hulk.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania